Hello, welcome to Cybersecurity Unlocked. If you are watching on YouTube, please help me like and subscribe, leave a comment. It really helps the channel, and plus you get all of the latest updates. I'm delighted to be joined by my good friend, Andrew Morfill. Andrew is a career intelligence officer with 8 years plus in the military, and he is now the Chief Information Security Officer for Kamenu. How are you doing, Andrew? Good to see you.
Good. Great to be here. Talked about it for a while, so it's good to actually be
here
in the studio.
Thanks so much for coming down. Now, your story is really interesting, and it's actually quite, I guess, sort of a common journey in terms of starting out in the military. And I've always thought that that's been a really healthy side to the cyber industry, in that it does create a kind of a pathway into the corporate world. A lot of stuff out there about how people make that transition into the civil world again, having been in the cold face of conflict and whatnot. So, I'd be really interested to get your sort of take on how you made that transition into the corporate world.
Yeah, and I think it's something that a lot of people ask people who transitioned about. I think coming from an intelligence background and military intelligence in general, it's not as military as, say, other units, say like T-THARM units, infantry, cavalry, things like that. And it's probably more relaxed, more civilian-like units. Spent a lot of time in civilian clothes working with civilian-type organizations. So actually the transition maybe wasn't as bad or as hard as it was. I also took a great year out, like a sabbatical, before transitioning from the military to starting my first job at Vodafone. I think the harder thing for a lot of vets is finding that first job in the first place. And that can be a very stressful period, because you have effectively like a 1 year notice. So you have to say, I'm leaving before, and no one's going to touch you with like a 1 year unless you're in one of those transition partnerships. A lot of firms run. I decided to just take some time off, decide what I was going to do. And you didn't want to do what I was doing, but then decide to take the route from a civilian perspective. And I don't think once a lot of vets figure out, that they want to leave and then get that new job, some struggle from a culture perspective, but most people actually do quite well, because the basics of what the military teaches you to do, civilian world, people call it like delivery and like product management and change management, all the stuff. It's actually just getting stuff done. And that's what the military teaches you to do really well. It also gives you a specialism, say intelligence or operations or comms or whatever branch you're in. The basics of delivery, products, change, project management is just that's what you do in the military. So and it's across rank structure as well, whether it be ranks, officers, whatever. Is you would generally find military people do transition quite easily once they've found the right job. It's actually finding the right job, whether it be the first job out of the military, the first or second, whatever. But once they've kind of find that cultural environment, they generally do quite well early on. Where I have seen people struggle is, and that's actually probably more to the more senior ends of either the ranks or the officers that have been in like the 20-year-esque people that are so regimented that they're just stuck in their ways, and seen a few of them struggle to adapt. But I think from my background, it's a question of just kind of had that gap. Grew a rubbish ginger beard, long hair, and had that transition. But then, just kind of doing what you've been doing, just changing the subject matter to the end of the day. So nothing too complex, not overthinking it, finding the right environment. Also helped that my boss that took me into Vodafone was ex-military as well. So you're speaking the same language. He knows how you operate. He knows the training. So that kind of helped as well.
Right. Yeah. I guess it comes down to timing as well. Like you say, if somebody's going to be sort of 15, 20 years, it can become quite sort of institutionalized. So making that transition, I guess, is a sort of a bigger leap. Are there any kind of like organizations or non-profit organizations that sort of help with that? Anybody
I think a lot of when I left the regulars, I think again that's one thing that helped. I was in the reserves, but that's kind of like a different segue. I left in 2013, 2014, I think, and there was only a few larger businesses starting like a vet transition partnership, because I think they were seeing the value in hiring vets and having a vet community. So Deloitte were doing it, and you go through over days, I think JP Morgan were, Barclays were doing it.
Oh yeah, another the Barclays one. Yeah.
But now they're really established, because there's a lot of we do good for the community kind of stuff in it, but then they see a load of people who are focused on delivery, turning up day in, day out and just delivering. They see the value in that, and it can put them across the whole of the business. So, there's the career transition partnerships and whatnot, but there's so much out there as a veteran when you're in there helping with your CV, your networking, if you want to lean into it and it's there.
Yeah.
But then also, as you're nearing the time of leaving, there's so much stuff to help you. It doesn't mean that you're going to get gifted a job, absolutely not, but there is stuff there, advice there. So when people say I wasn't supported, I don't necessarily believe that. I think it's actually people didn't lean into the help that was there, that was on offer, if I'm perfectly honest.
Right. Yeah. So it is there. It's just I guess having the courage to kind of reach out.
I'm 10 years out of date,
isn't it?
I'm also 10 years out of date, which makes me feel really old. But even when I was, I can't imagine it's got any worse. I can only imagine it's been more progressed. But one thing that is actually probably a massive force multiplier, I hate that phrase, especially very military, is the networks, the individual, so the in-core network, the military intelligence network, I'm sure the household division have their own little mafia as well, but utilizing those like internal channels, that's how I got my first job leaving. It was the in-core network. It's actually the best part of the in-core is the bit that helps you leave. That was how I got my first job in terms of like it was advertised internally on that network, and because you're part of a trusted network, people can then go away and verify you with people you've served with, people who've been your boss, people who've served underneath you. You know, so they kind of, it's a self-licking lollipops. It was.
Yeah, I think it's definitely another sort of healthy side to the industry is a very kind of a sharing kind of community-based industry. So everybody kind of makes my job a little bit more difficult. I have to say like, oh yeah, I know this guy or I know this girl. It was like, okay, right. So yeah, it can make it a little bit more difficult. But okay. And then in terms of, I mean, it seems like looking at your sort of career history, it was pretty kind of seamless. So, you've moved into kind of, working for blue chip, customers like, like Vodafone, Santander. What would you see are the sort of classic differences between the sort of the telco industry and banking?
Not a lot. Subject matter, I would say the big differences are more the size of the organizations.
Yeah.
So in terms of the Vodafones, the Leonardo Selexes, the Santanders, they all have the same problem. The subject matter is just slightly different with different regulations and different regulators. They all face the same issue of less budget, loads of legacy issues from a technology perspective with a consumer base that wants more than you can possibly deliver. I think the stark difference, I think from my perspective, has always been the scale of organization, having worked now for a startup for 4 years. The big difference is large enterprise to startup. And at Kameni, we have found not everyone can make that transition. You can be an absolute rock star in one organization and come unstuck very quickly in another. Not necessarily because you're not capable, it's just certain people can work and fit within a certain team, within an organization, within a dynamic, whereas other people can't. And that's not necessarily a reflection on their capability. It's just some people are good in large organizations and can't do it in small, and then vice versa. What I've found is, so people who've necessarily maybe large banks, for instance, we're a financial services firm at Kameni, is, they're like a whiteboard, big hands, big map. They happily do a large thing on this is how it works, this is how it's going to flow. But then that's where they stop. Whereas in a small firm, you need to be able to not only do the big hands, big map, you need to then put your hands on keyboards and go away and deliver it and execute it. Because, when I left Santander, it's a question of, there's no one there doing your PowerPoints for you or building those presentations. Not only are you having to have the strategy, you then have to go away and do the execution part as well. And I think that's potentially where a lot of people fall down when they're moving from large to small, is they're used to be able to either have people to do that execution for them, or if they're out of their comfort zone or out of their expertise, there's nowhere to hide. When you're a team of 6, 7, 30, 40, you have to be able to deliver as well as do the planning and strategy part, and some people don't have the ability to transition between those two types of organizations. And is that what sort of attracted you to your current role, in it being sort of a blank canvas and the opportunity to build and design something? 110%. It was, combination of being able to do cyber, being able to do blockchain, crypto, and yet not having any legacy issues. I've been able to, so the foresight of the people who set Kameni up is, it has to be secure, or has to be perceived to be secure. Those two things are not necessarily the same, but we are secure. But there needs to be the perception that security is built in from the start, helps with regulators, helps with investors, helps with customers. But I don't have any shadow IT. I don't have any on-prem, as we were discussing before. Everything is cloud-based. There's no there's nothing on the network that I don't know about. I know coverage of all my main tool sets. You can't join the network without a managed device. I don't have to put the genie back in the bottle because me and the CTO at the time, it's been designed from the outset that it was never allowed to run free. It was always because we were building the company before we were regulated. So it wasn't like up and running and servicing customers before, we kind of got there. As employee number 3, the CTO was already there. So we kind of built this thing to be secure, fundamentals, the hygiene's in place. I don't have to have a project stream of legacy kit, legacy IT, whether it be on-prem, shadow IT, black IT. I just don't have those issues. We have lots of other issues, but I don't have that genie to put back in the box, as it were.
Yeah, so just building in the security from the outset, from the beginning, 110%. And obviously that makes it a lot easier.
Culture as well, that's another big one. Much easier to impart a security culture from the start if it's there and embedded.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, just on to touch on that as well, within your current role, what I think, again, and this would be something that I guess the followers would be interested to hear from your perspective, building and growing a team. What are the sort of key characteristics that you look for, interviewing people from banks and other organizations? What are the key attributes that you tend to look for?
I think the technical skills is a big one.
Yeah,
I think there's a mindset. There's definitely a cultural element of it, and I think recruiting. I see that's one of the biggest things I've taken from moving from large to small organization is it's okay to have a strategy, but culture trumps strategy every day of the week. Mm-hmm. And recruiting from the bottom to the top is absolutely fundamental. Just like casting in a good film, it can be a great script, but if you cast it poorly, it'll be terrible. And it's the same within a small organization. You get 1 or 2 hires wrong, especially at senior level, and it takes a while to iron those crinkles out. So recruiting wise, it's about, okay, what do I have now, but what I'm going to need in 6 months? That's very difficult to do when you're working in digital asset space because that changes very quickly. Your ecosystem changes quickly. Your suppliers change very quickly. So there's one thing about getting, say, recruitment. The way that I built the team is fine. You need your Web 2 stuff sorted. That should be a given. It's a small organization. We don't have any particular major issues from a legacy perspective, but also who's good enough, pardon me, and also who wants to gain the knowledge of being able to do that, but then put the Web3 context on it as well. Being comfortable, being uncomfortable. I don't know that. Do I want or have the ability to go and find out and be okay with that there's 5 answers, all of which might not be right? Being okay with using a tool that is open source, doesn't have great reviews, but it's the only one in there to support a service that no one else has built yet with that supplier that only is 6 months old. A lot of security people aren't comfortable with that dynamic, but actually, balancing that, be good enough to balance that and have the knowledge and then the kind of like inquisitiveness to be able to operate in that space. And it comes down to not only technical skills, but the mindset of being okay with it not being perfect.
Yeah. And I guess sort of being in a small organization, you're exposed to many different sort of stakeholders as well. So having, good, high level of EQ. Yes
and no. I would say in cyber that is a little bit overrated in a sense. Some of the best engineers don't necessarily have as much EQ, and I'm okay with that. As a manager, as a leader, you don't necessarily need everybody to be amazing at everything. Yeah. If they're really good at A and you just need them to be good at A and they're happy with doing A, then I don't need them to be an amazing manager. I don't need, as long as they are understood that they've been brought in to do A and I could pay them a load of money to do A. Necessarily best engineers, best devs become the best managers, and kind of like the Google model is very similar to the football manager model. Football managers, they're not the highest paid people in the organization. No. They carry the cam for the function of the team, but the players are paid a lot more. Similar to, I think, how they run it at Google. Some really good examples of that. So you're paid to manage the rock stars. The manager isn't going to go play left wing, just like some of the managers aren't going to become like a blockchain engineer. But, the EQ is secondary if it may be in a managerial role or a stakeholder role or maybe a GRC role that's working across the business. But if you need someone super technical in that space and just to deliver on that, EQ can be optional, would be my take on it.
Okay. And what do you think the future looks like from a security perspective for, cryptocurrency and the whole sort of Web3 ecosystem?
We have a bit of an issue within cryptocurrency at the moment. I've got the kids are still kind of running the industry. Yeah. Every other week there's a DeFi hack, Curve being the issue. And, then you read the reports. Well, no one really knows how this happened yet. We're still working on it. And then you add the dynamic of, the attacker's just given the money back. The whole DeFi attack space is absolutely baffling. It just, it's proper Wild West, but you step away from DeFi, you step away from cryptocurrency, and you look at the underlying technology, so the wider Web3 ecosystem, blockchain ecosystem. That's actually where the really exciting stuff for me is happening from a security perspective. So a lot of the banks are building their own private blockchains. They don't want to interact with some of the public blockchains for the reason we've just been through. Like Wild West have some real legacy issues, have some real fundamental connectivity issues, and it's a completely different podcast. But so the bank's dealing with blockchain, private blockchains, and there's the connectivity as a walled garden thing that you can go down. All those need securing, all those at some point will need external validation of those private blockchains, just like in the Web2 space. You want either maturity assessments so that you can manage stakeholders. Say, if we're here are our gaps, here's where everyone else is, or you want your once a year penetration test to show your ISO 27001 auditor. There is that. There will always be that. But in a new space within Web3, within blockchain, nobody's really doing that yet.
Yeah.
No one can turn around and say, well, these people are really good at it, and these people are bad at it. These people don't know what they're doing and will be hacked tomorrow if they would go into this space. Really boring. You segue that into, say, like the insurance space. I know, so bear with me. You're looking at me like, there's a massive capacity issue from an insurance perspective, insuring not digital asset firms, but the blockchain ecosystem as well at the moment. So the whole industry has 6 billion worth of capacity to insure, right? So that has to be split up across the whole industry.
Yeah.
How do they know who is good and who is bad? And not only Web2 security, you can kind of ascertain that, but who's doing the good stuff in the Web3 space? Who's really good at their smart contracts? How often are they audited? Who's really good at blockchain security? How often are they audited? And how good is that stuff in general? And therefore, what standards that don't exist yet are you coming into? So an area, let's say a maturity framework or some global standards that maybe uses the best in Web2, if all the space in Web3 goes for security insurance company and goes, actually, they're a 3 out of 10, they're a 6 out of 10, they're an 8 out of 10 on this standard that is good or agreed upon or brings together all the good stuff, that firm gets a 10%, 15, 20% discount on their premium because they've aligned to an agreed standard. That ecosystem doesn't exist yet in the Web3 blockchain space. We're talking, as I say, big hands, big map here, but a lot of that is still there. You go into manufacturing, the blockchain space in terms of supply chain continuity, things like that. You're much easier on the blockchain in theory. All that will need securing, all that will need auditing, all that will need continuing. You go into the gaming space, similar problems in a slightly different ecosystem. So it's not the Web3 blockchain space is not just limited to traditional finance, not just limited to DeFi and Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all the finance space. There is the DeFi bit, and how you secure DeFi is a completely different, well, not completely different, but it's just one part of a much larger Web3 blockchain security conundrum, as it was.
So how far away do you think we are from that kind of sort of standard?
Oh, we're not even at the start line. I think, well, the standards people are talking about, we've contributed to a few, and there's a as with one of the good and the bad things of cybersecurity is the community. I find elements of it massively toxic, but then you find a niche of people who actually want to do good that aren't gatekeeping it. I find that quite empowering. There's some good people about that. Kind of exists within the Web2 space, but it's very small. A lot of people know each other even more so than in the Web2 cybersecurity space, and kind of get agreed upon standards never going to happen across the industry. But we're not even at the start line to have an ecosystem that can agree on those kind of standards. So it'll need like one or two good firms to be turning around and be like, we think this is a good place to start, and take it to the insurance firms or the wider some of the investment banks that are doing their private blockchain stuff. Be like, here's a way to assess where we think you are, and for you to be able to manage that message to your external stakeholders and internal stakeholders to validate the projects that you're working on. And a lot of that comes down to, say, partnerships as well, working with good firms, innovative firms in the security space, because there aren't many of them.
Absolutely. And what sort of advice would you give anybody that is maybe similar to yourself, where you've had sort of a long sort of stellar career in blue chip customers, that maybe is interested in this space, in this area, and wants to kind of try and carve out a career in digital assets?
All I can give is an experience of how I did it.
Yeah.
So I was at Santander at the time, global head of cybersecurity, and got contacted about this job. I understood high level about Bitcoin and about blockchain, and I understood the how it was going to, how in my opinion, it still is going to change the finance sector and the traditional finance sector. So I binned off my Spanish lessons and just started listening to blockchain podcasts and reading about blockchain. I went all in down it. I bought stuff. I started moving stuff around just so I could learn how it worked and learn how user friendly it wasn't, so that when I started talking to the people who were putting the team together, you had an area of legitimacy. So, okay, fine, I use this exchange, I use this wallet. That's a nightmare. There's this product development here, and it's one of those things that when we interview people, obviously finding people is difficult anyway. Finding people who want to leave a relatively secure Web2 cybersecurity job to come work at a crypto startup with the market, whereas at the moment you've got to question their sanity.
Exactly, yeah.
But then you also have, well, what do you own? What are you trading? How are you staking it? And you can quickly...
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily prerequisite, because I'm, we're doing some DevSecOps stuff as well. They're difficult to find. If we said you have to be able to do this and be interested in crypto, then we're never going to hire anyone. But you can tell the people within like 5-10 minutes, well, what have you bought? Are you following like the Ripple case, or what do we think about the SEC? And then, what are you trading? What have you got? What are your war stories? And I would say if you want to get into the blockchain space and the crypto space, then you need to be a participant.
Exactly, yeah. Jump in with 2 feet.
Exactly. It doesn't cost a lot of money. There's a lot of web-based wallets, a Ledger, a Trezor, buy a bit, a few exchanges, get cracking, stake it. There's a lot of open source projects now. Create your own blockchain. It's all open source. It's all on GitHub. You can, if you want to, there's some rabbit holes that you can go down, and you'll wake up in 2 weeks' time and figure where have I been? But if you want to get into the space, obviously there's not a lot of jobs going at the moment, but kind of just fingers crossed the next bull run, be in a good position for when it does turn around. Be like, okay, not only do I do Web2 security pretty well, but here's what I've built, here's what I've been researching, here's what I'm doing, here's what projects I'm involved in. It's a much easier sell. I won't ask you when the next bull run is, because I guess if you knew that, you should be doing something maybe a little bit different. I've literally, hope's not a course of action, but we need one pretty soon. Yeah, we can all hope. Okay, cool. And just lastly, I've been trying to get a good sense on what are the latest kind of threat vectors, and what do you see as the biggest sort of threats that we face today, this year, next year? Web 2 or Web 3? Both. Web 2 never changes. So I talk at a few conferences, and one of the guys the other day was like, Andy, we need some new ideas for themes. I was like, Tom, there are no new themes. They're all the same. It's all about conference-wise, it's maybe the top 5 or 10% change in terms of, you'll probably see some really innovative, cool stuff at DEF CON this year, right? In terms of some really new exploits or blah, blah, blah. Patch your boxes, don't click on the link, don't follow the email, put MFA everywhere, put some good EDR, you're going to deal with most things. A massive oversimplification of it, and everyone's going to be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But know what you've got, know how to protect it, patch it, put MFA everywhere, put some EDR everywhere, and control some access. You're dealing with the majority of threats. Web 3, I've no idea. Some people need to start building some more secure smart contracts. If you're going to be securing tens of hundred millions of dollars, it'd be a good place to start. Some basic Web 2 principles apply to Web 3. So secure hosting would be a good one. More smart contract auditing would be a great place to start. But the nuance is, I was saying at the start, Web 3. So I think I was reading it last night, is on the Curve attack at the moment, the attacker's giving back at the moment quite a lot of the money. And that happens quite a lot. Okay. So it's a weird dynamic, right?
Why is that?
There's various different theories to it. Blockchain, everything's on the blockchain. So I think the exit plan is never really thought through in terms of, okay, fine, I've just hooped this contract for 100 million. How am I going to monetize it? Because I've now got half the community and X law enforcement agencies after me. I'm not in a great spot. So I'm just going to give most of it back. And a few, I can't remember which one it was, they'll turn around and be like, okay, fine. If you give it back, you can keep 10% and we'll write, and we won't pursue you for it. Right. So there's that kind of dynamic as well, right? In a sense that it's much easier to monetize data the vexful traders as a ransomware gang running out of Russia than it is to, you've just taken some spurious fake internet protocol and now the whole of the community is looking at you, seeing where you're moving it next,
Right.
and trying to wash that through various mixers that, it's much harder to exfiltrate or exit from a Web3 perspective. Obviously, some people are very good at it.
Right.
But I think I would suggest a lot of the actors or the red teams, red forces in this place, there's more amateur nature to it. And exiting is not necessarily there. They haven't really thought through to finish.
Right. Okay. So there's level of sophistication on sort of both sides. Then there's still got quite a big runway to go.
Oh,
so
massive. Yeah, absolutely. The
I guess
DeFi,
that's exciting for you, isn't it?
yeah, there's a massive opportunity, but when you're in charge of a firm that protects billions worth of dollars, there's an element of
Makes you nervous.
yeah, just a little bit.
All right. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for coming in today, Andrew. It's really good to meet you and catch up. And thanks to everybody for listening. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll see you on the next episode.